What's up, you guys? Andrew here, obviously, and I'm back with a new video, different kind of video. Today I'm going to be doing a tier list on a slew of old school death metal band scenes that I came up with, as well as some ideas that you guys threw out. I've been wanting to do tier lists for a while now on this channel. I think it's a really great way to organize and rank a lot of different objects and things in a really convenient and visually stimulating way. I was originally going to do one towards thrash metal, but I realized that by the time I get all that information down, it won't be done until May. So I wanted to do this one instead. Now, even though this is going to be primarily about old school death metal, I will take into account all different subgenres of death metal, whether that's old school, brutal, tech, prog, grind, whatever. All of it is applicable and will be, I'll judge it. But I need to stress this. This is based on my opinion and my opinion alone. I won't judge these based on influence. I won't judge these based on objectivity. This is just my opinion and how I enjoy the bands in these scenes. So you're not going to agree with this. That's okay. Just don't be a dick about it. I know someone's going to be, but just don't. So, the scenes I have listed here are California, Canada, Finland, Florida, Germany, Latin and South America, Netherlands, Norway, New York, and Pennsylvania. I'll get to why I grouped those later. I'll get to why I grouped those together when I get there. Pacific Northwest, Poland, Sweden, and the United Kingdom. Before we get started, if you hear any music throughout this video, it's just royalty-free death metal. I'm too much of a pussy to ask actual bands for use of their music, so it's just royalty-free. Anyways, let's just get started. Okay, so first up we have California, and California has a pretty decent scene. Autopsy is great. Repulsion, even though I think they started in Flint, Michigan, they moved to California a little later. Exhumed, I think Terrorizer's from there. Vile, which is a really good band. Deeds of Flesh, which is really cool. Primeval, kind of a death thrash band. It's a pretty good scene. Not my favorite, but I think it's solid. I'm going to put it in the B tier. Next up, we have Canada. I was originally going to include war metal in this ranking, in this tier list, at least have it affect my opinions. But I started to think about it and I was like, war metal is more of a black metal thing. So I'm just going to talk about death metal bands that, I'm not going to talk about war metal. I'm just going to talk about death metal. And if that's the case, Canada's got an okay scene. Kryptopsy, one of my favorite death metal bands ever. The debut Kryptopsy album is my favorite old school death metal record. I absolutely adore it. Gorguts, I like the first two Gorguts albums. Whatever about the rest. Slaughter's alright. Cataclysm. Rotting's pretty cool. I'd say Canada is also B tier. I'll put it ahead of California, actually. Just because of the strength of Kryptopsy. Although, fuck, this is where it's going to get tough. But man, California's got Autopsy. No, I'm going to put Canada in front. Because I think Rotting is really, really, really good. So, but it's just barely. Next up, Finland. Finland, oh boy. Finland, I'll just come out and say it. Oh shit. S tier. One of my favorite scenes ever. I think Finland is absolutely brilliant. Somehow one of the most talked about scenes ever and one of the most non-talked about scenes. Everyone knows Demilich, and Demilich is great. But Demilich, the scene does not start and end with Demilich. There's so many other good bands. Abhorrence, Demigod, Depravity, Amorphous, Ripikulu, I think that's how you say it. I'm not really sure. Zeisma, I think that's how you say it. Children of Bodom, who I'm not super huge on, but I know a lot of people are. Adrelimich, Convulse, Funebri, Puterince, Beharit, Bucket, throw them in there. Finland's got such a heavy, it's such a heavy sound, but it's also really, really unique. And I just think that the quality and the depth of the scene is almost unrivaled. So because of that, I'm going to put Finland in S tier. Next up, Florida. Do I even need to mention the bands in Florida? Everyone knows them. You know, it's the most popular death metal scene of all time. Death, Morbid Angel, Obituary, Atheist, Cynic, Deicide. I mean, so many amazing bands. Except for Deicide. Anyways, so I really like Florida. I'm going to put Florida in A tier. My problem with Florida is that it's just talked about a little too much, in my opinion. It's a great scene, but I definitely think that, you know, a couple other scenes could definitely get more mention than it. And the More Sound Studios production that a lot of those bands had, while I do think there's a charm to it, it doesn't age as well as I would like to. So for that, Florida's going to sit at an A tier, but a very respectable A tier. Next up is Germany. Germany's got a pretty cool scene. Germany, I feel like, has a lot of bands that take influence from other scenes and kind of makes it their own. There's a lot of death thrash, Protector, even like an early 90s Sodom, you know, kind of has that death thrash sound. A band like Atrocity has that kind of UK death doom sound. Bands like Morgoth have a Florida sound to them. There's other pretty cool bands like Flesh Crawl and Blood, which take influence from other stuff from the United States. I just think Germany is a really cool scene. I like it. I'm going to put it B tier. I'm not going to say it's better than Canada or California, but I definitely think it's a solid scene. Next up is Latin and South America. And I grouped these two together because I think they have both a similar sound to them, and also individually I'm not as educated as I would like to be in either scene, but together I know a little bit. And because of that, I'm actually going to put them A tier. I think it's a great scene. The amount of variety in these two scenes is unbelievable. You got stuff like the Chasm, which is like a progressive death metal sound. Sepultura had kind of a death metal influence to some of their riffs. Xenopath, Mystifier, Crisium, Mortuary, Holocausto, the Mexican Disgorge. Hell, even Sarcophago in the late 80s and early 90s, you know. Just a really good scene, really diverse. I really enjoy Latin and South America death metal. Next up is Netherlands. I think Netherlands has a really underrated scene towards it. Of course you have Pestilence, and of course you have Asphyx, but there's a lot of other really solid bands. I'm thinking of Sinister. I'm thinking of Gorefest. How do you say Sempithero Death Rain? I think that's how you say it. Death Squad, which is a kind of a unique mid-tempo, almost like Celtic Frost death metal. Really cool scene. I like Netherlands. I would say it's B tier. Maybe like right around there. A solid B, but I think Netherlands is pretty solid. Norway's got an interesting scene as well, because they're not really known for their death metal. However, they have two really amazing death metal bands, Molested and Darkthrone. Molested is one of my favorite death metal bands ever. I think they're absolutely fantastic. Darkthrone doesn't have a lot of death metal material. Soulside Journey, Goat Lord, a few demos here or there. Not a lot of material to go off of. There's other bands, Cadaver, Old Funeral, Mortem. However, I do think that this scene is a little top heavy. I'll say it's B tier, but definitely lower echelon B tier, because I think Molested and Dark Throne are way up there, and then Cadaver, Mortem, and Old Funeral, and some of the other Norwegian bands are kind of mid-tier. Next up, New York and Pennsylvania. Now, the reason I group these two together is because a lot of the bands, not only do they sound kind of similar, but people usually mix them up anyways. People usually think that Incantation or Rodivore are New York bands, and I've heard people say stuff like Mortician is a Pennsylvania band. And these two scenes are mainly known for their brutal, heavy sounds. They are a brewing ground, a petri dish for brutal, technical death metal. Geez, the amount of great bands from this scene. I'm going to try and name as many as I can. Cannibal Corpse, Incantation, Rodivore, Immolation, Pyrexia, Winter, Repudiation, Morpheus Descends, Mortician, which I already said, Malevolent Creation, Internal Bleeding, Brutal Truth. I know they're from New Jersey, but fuck it, throw Mortal Decay in there. Skinless, fucking, I think I already said Rodivore. If you want to throw in some Ohio bands, Gutted is really good, Regurgitation's really good. Overall D tier. I'm just kidding. This might be my favorite scene. I really absolutely adore this scene. Not only am I from Pennsylvania, but I think that this sound really appeals to me. This kind of brutal, old school death metal sound. And while I'm on the topic, I have to give a big shout out, big ups to fellow YouTuber Jimmy from the Block. This guy really fucking knows his old school brutal death metal. And through his videos, I got into so many amazing bands. I've had a few conversations with him on Instagram. He's a cool guy. I'll put a link in the description to his channel. Check him out. But yeah, this brutal old school sound that is in a lot of these states, the New York, the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Ohio. I don't want to go past that. I don't want to go up to Massachusetts, even though, you know, you got stuff like Scattered Remnants. I don't want to go that far because that would just be overpowered. Just think of it as that, you know, dual, quad, tri-state connection, whatever, of brutal old school death metal is my favorite region for death metal. As great as Finland is, I really fucking love the New York, Pennsylvania stuff. Next up, Pacific Northwest. Pacific Northwest, I wasn't going to include this, but I got a recommendation from fellow Instagram user, I think it's pronounced Tilly, Tyson. He's a great guy. He knows his shit about old school, underground, death metal, and doom metal. And he recommended the Pacific Northwest scene. In terms of modern day death metal, the Pacific Northwest there's so many bands there that are signed at like 20 Bucks Spin or Maggot Stomp. It's a really hot scene for modern death metal. However, for old school death metal, I personally don't really see that many amazing bands. However, I do think there's one amazing band from the scene, and that would be Infestor. One of my favorite death metal bands ever. I absolutely adore Infestor. Other than that, I really don't think there's much in the way for this scene, so I'm going to put Pacific Northwest in the C tier. They would go in the D tier, but I think Infestor is so good that I'm going to put them in C tier. Unfortunately, staying on this underwhelming trend, we now have Poland. And Poland, to my knowledge, I don't think there's a lot going for the Polish scene in the old school days. The most popular band I can think of is Vader, and I'm not like a huge Vader fan. And then I really sat and I really tried to think of like really good Polish bands, and I could not think of any. So if anyone has any recommendations, please let me know, because I couldn't think of many noteworthy death metal bands from the Polish scene. And I was really racking my brain, like maybe like a late 90s Behemoth, but if we were using blackened death metal Behemoth as a positive reference, that's not really that good. So I'm unfortunately going to put Poland in D tier. I apologize to any Polish viewers. If you want to educate me on why your scene actually rules, please let me know. But for now, D tier. Sweden. Sweden might be like the second or third most popular death metal scene ever. So many bands. You know, of course you have the big four of Entombed, Grave, Unleashed, and Dismember. Earlier iterations like Nihilist and Carnage. The Gothenburg scene of Dark Tranquility, In Flames, and At the Gates. Edge of Sanity, Utamo, Gorment, Merciless, Necrophobic. There's a lot of stuff from Sweden. I like the Swedish scene. I would put Sweden at like a B+. Come on, there we go. At like a B+. However, and I'll put an asterisk here, my favorite band of all time is Opeth. If we include Opeth, I know some people don't even want to consider them death metal. They don't want to consider them part of the Swedish scene. If we include Opeth, I would bump them up to like an A-. So with Opeth, I would say Sweden's an A-. Without Opeth, I would say B+. I personally would include Opeth in the scenes. I'm going to put Sweden at an A-. And finally, we have the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom may not be your first kind of thought when it comes to old school death metal scenes. However, they are one of the most influential scenes I can think of. Punk, as we know, it started in the US. But when Britain got their hands on hardcore punk and they created what we know as crust punk, that laid the groundwork for grindcore, and bands like Napalm Death and Carcass completely took that crust punk sound to a whole new level and revolutionized death metal as we know it. Other great bands from that scene. Bolt Thrower, who, while they weren't necessarily a grindcore band necessarily, they had a rough, grindy sound, at least in the guitar tone and in the production on like their first two albums. Benediction, you got Death Doom, really popular Death Doom acts like My Dying Bride and Paradise Lost. Kind of American worship bands like Cancer. I think UK is a pretty solid scene, very influential, but I'm only judging this based on quality, and quantity to a lesser degree. I'm gonna put UK maybe like B+ territory, mainly on the strength of Bolt Thrower. I fucking love Bolt Thrower. Maybe like B+. Yeah, that's good. So yeah, there we go. Quick rundown: D tier Poland, C tier Pacific Northwest, B tier in order from least to best: Norway, Germany, Netherlands, California, Canada, United Kingdom. A tier Sweden, Latin South America, Florida. S tier Finland, and then New York and Pennsylvania. So that's how I would rank these old school death metal scenes. If you guys like this video, I would love to do more tier lists on different metal subgenres. I already have one in the works for a thrash metal one. I would love to do ones on black metal, maybe doom even. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for the next one.